good morning, everyone, and welcome to this webinar, this joint webinar from Euroheat and Power and Solar Heat Europe on the rise of solar district heating. As you know, the current energy and climate crises are pointing in a very clear direction. We need a faster transition towards clean and renewable energy sources in heating. We repeat it very often, but maybe not enough. Heat is half of our European energy demand, and more than 60% still comes from fossil fuels. That means, on the one hand, that the size of the challenge is absolutely significant, but so are the opportunities, because in many ways, the European heat transition could really be the cradle of Europe's next clean technology revolution. And the beauty of it and the beauty of the clean heat sources that we have at hand is that compared to other less mature technology, we are more talking here about an evolution than a revolution. Indeed, we already have clean and efficient technologies for heating available in Europe. They are ready to deploy and they can already deliver massive gas savings to support Europe's decarbonisation strategy and energy independence. With solar thermal and district heating and cooling, you actually have one of the winning teams. They offer great synergies for Europe's heat transition. On the one hand, you have solar thermal, a renewable heat technology with high efficiency, which is kind of low tech with low material intensity. It is able already to decarbonize buildings, but also industry. And combined with thermal storage, it is one of the happy few which can really pride itself of providing seasonal heat demand. On the other hand, you have district heating and cooling, which is the only infrastructure allowing for the combined use of local renewable heat sources, renewable electricity, and the recovery of sustainable excess heat sources from the industry and buildings. So that's why today, Euroheat and Power and Solar Heat Europe are very happy to bring to you this webinar on the rise of solar district heating to unfold together the great opportunities which we have at hand to further decarbonize our cities and our industries. And before I start introducing also the great panel that we have today to discuss this important matter, I will start by handing over to our keynote speaker, Barbel Epp. I don't think I need to introduce Barbel to the solar thermal world already, but for those that do not know her, she is the managing director and founder of the German market research agency Solarico. But today she will also speak on behalf of the IEA Solar Heating and Cooling Program to set the scene. Barbel, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Aurélie. A very nice introduction. Good morning from my side as well. As Aurélie said, I speak on behalf of the IEA Solar Heating and Cooling Program today, especially task 68, which is on efficient solar district heating. We have 6,000 district heating systems across Europe, and it will be an enormous task to decarbonize all of them in the next decade. Solar heat is, as already said, a proven, available, cost-effective measure to help to complete this enormous task. And I would like to give you an introduction in this presentation on how solar district heating works, who is using it already successfully, and how it can be combined intelligently with biomass boilers, heat pumps, and thermal storage tanks. This map shows you, it's all colored in orange and yellow, all the countries in Europe which already use solar district heating. You see that from the very far north in Norway to the very far south in Spain, you find them. The box tells you the name of the country and the number of plants and the capacity installed. So the dark orange countries, which is Austria, Germany, Denmark, and Sweden, are the front runners with most of the systems. In some of the countries, you have only 1 or 2 systems yet so far. How does solar district heating works? I mean, you have a collector field which produces, which harvests the sun. You always need a kind of storage which corresponds to the field. And this works together with the heating center to provide the required temperature to your district heating grid. If you want to reach like solar shares in your district heating grid around about up to 20%, this setting is the correct one. If you want to go a bit higher and you want to reach solar fractions in the range of 30 to 60%, you need a seasonal heat storage, which is illustrated here. That could be a big water basin buried in the ground and covered with an insulated lid. So, and what you do here is you store surplus heat from the summer months. If you dimension your collector field in a way that you have additional solar yield, and you store this and use it in the autumn and winter season, as it is illustrated here in light yellow. And this brings up your solar fraction tremendously. And these kind of systems work successfully in Denmark a lot. Here, Latvia, Salapils is a real front runner in terms of renewable district heating. They have 90% share since 2019, and I'm happy that Ina, the managing director of this utility, is today with us in the panel to tell us more about this success story. They cover 72% biomass within their total heat demand of 65 gigawatt hours, and 16% is contributed by solar thermal and only the rest by gas. They have a 15 megawatt system installed in the forest, as you can see on the photo. Solar heat and biomass is actually a good match because you save a lot of wood in summer when your solar system takes over 100% of your solar and of your heat needs in your district heating grid. And this also extends the service lifetime of your boilers because you have time to, shut them down to do, your maintenance in summer, and you will have less operating times. And obviously you have a 100% pollution-free heat source over summer, which is in touristic areas an important one, an important measure. Multi-megawatt solar district heating plants are on the growth path in Europe at the moment. We have a 36 megawatt system under construction in Groningen in the Netherlands. And this table alone shows you plant systems in the size of 281 megawatt. I want to applaud here to Bojan, or refer to Bojan. He will be on the panel today as well, and he works for the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development and is responsible for the first visibility studies, which are mentioned in this table in Kosovo and Serbia, and he did a great job in mobilizing the cities to go in the direction of solar heat. The requirement why this was why there are so many large visibility studies now in preparation or even completed is because the EBRD bank subsidized these visibility studies and also the Climate and Energy Fund. This was an important vehicle to actually size up solar district heating, that visibility studies were completely paid by these two players. The first of these projects, which is very likely to be realized because the funding of 80 million is already secured, is Big Solar Pristina, and it replaced coal-based electric heating. I showed you this map to make you aware of the fact that if you have a large solar district heating size, like here in this case, it's 40 megawatt, the blue field on the top here, together with the seasonal storage, which is this gray cube, you can go further away from your city, even, referring to the losses that you might have via the piping. In this case, it's 4 kilometers, but this brings down your ground costs. So this argument that in the outskirts of the city, land is very expensive because it's always potential construction land, you will not, you can go further away and find cheaper land. In this case, the blue line shows you the connection to the original power plant, which is supplying the heat today with the city, and it has also 1.6 kilometers. The construction will start hopefully here in 2024. Again, space. There is space for solar heat, even in larger cities. This is another example from Turin in Italy, an 850,000 inhabitant city. The calculation here was to see how big a field would be if 20% of the district heating heat demand would be covered with solar for this city. And you see the square here in green. It's a reasonable size cube, which really fits into the city, and you can find even other areas around the city center that could supply these 20%. So if there is a political volunteer, even in larger cities, there's always space for solar heat available. But going back to a big Solar Pristina, I would like to stress an interesting design effect of this plant. And this is the combination with absorption heat pumps. You see here again what I've shown before, a collector field, you know, with the seasonal storage, which can be stored heat up to 95 degrees. But the district heating grid in the center of Pristina requires 125 degrees. So this gap is done by a high temperature absorption heat pump. And this combination was used a lot in Denmark, and it has really a nice two effects. I mean, first, you can directly feed into a feed line of a district heating grid, even at higher temperatures. And secondly, this absorption heat pump helps you a lot to empty your storage to a very high extent over the winter season, you know, like you can use, even if the storage is already cooled down to 30, 40 degrees, the heat pump can still lift it up and use it as a heat source. But temperatures in district heating grids can be also reached by changing the collector type. This is, for example, an installation in Geneva which produces 85 degrees even in winter time on a guaranteed level, because it uses a special high vacuum tube, vacuum flat plate collectors. And the company is TVP Solar, and we have today the Vice President Business Development, Guglielmo, on the panel to tell us more about that. So you can either reduce the return flow, the flow rate in your field to get higher temperatures, or you use a different type of collectors if you have higher temperature needs in your grid. Costs, well, a very important issue. We have gathered 120 real cost data of district heating plants in Europe, mainly in the countries Germany, Austria, and Denmark, installed over the last 10 years. And we have put them into this slide to show a typical cost reduction curve over size. So the x-axis is the size of the systems. And the trend curve you can put into this crowd of points indicates that a doubling of the size of the plant reduces the costs by 14%. The largest plant in Europe, which is shown here, Silkeborg, with 110 megawatt, it's from 2016, is part of this assessment. So you would find it somewhere very far on the right-hand side outside the chart. But the trend curve would indicate costs of 180 euro per square meter at this huge size of plants. So I would like to show you what this does now to levelize costs of heat. This chart here is calculated over 25 years with a discount rate of 3%. And on the left-hand side, you find Silkeborg again. With the real costs of the year 2016, you end up with 33 euro per megawatt hours at the typical irradiation of Denmark. But if you place this particular system in sunnier rich countries, and now we get to Serbia, where Bojan is based, and he's very successful with selling solar thermal systems there, or even France and Spain, you reduce the costs even by half again. And you see these 18 euro per megawatt hours is a tremendous saving against what we had as some of the gas costs we had last year. Yeah, so again, an issue on area, because this is usually seen as the biggest barrier in terms of solar district heating. I wanted to give you this rule of thumb. If you want to meet 20% of the total annual heat demand from 1,000 households living in older buildings, you need a hectare. You need a hectare of ground. And if you know that a soccer field is already 1.7 hectare, you see that, I mean, you know that in a lot of your neighborhoods and quarters in your city, there are football places, you know. So you see that a hectare is not really a barrier. You can find hectares in your available hectares in your city. And this is my last slide already. I mean, just to sensibilize you that solar heat has a very nice harvesting rate per square meter. If you compare it, for example, with PV, as PV has a much lower efficiency on the square meter, you harvest a factor 3 more kilowatt hours. And even if you compare this to biomass, I mean grown biomass, not residual biomass from forest, obviously, but ground biomass would even have a factor 33 lower than a solar thermal plant on the same area. To give you some ideas where you could find additional information if you want to do the effect of having a visibility study or any kind of consultancy, we have listed some very advanced engineering and research institutions in Europe that can consult you on solar district heating, and they are all part of the IEA Solar Heating and Cooling Program Task 68. And we have also listed you a number of technology providers here which are experienced. And if you want to start like tendering or you need further technical advice on your particular site. So I hope you enjoyed that. Thanks very much for the attention. I get back to Aurelie and I'm really looking forward to the discussion.
Yes, thank you very much, Barbel. That was really a great presentation, and I personally learned a lot already. So that's very promising for the next steps of our exchanges. So now, before I introduce to you all the panel, just a quick reminder for the audience: if you would like to ask a question already or during the panel discussion, you just need to enter the question in the chat, and I will look at them as we go during the discussion. And of course, after we have about 15 minutes of Q&A after our panel discussion. But now we can deep dive really into the meat and discuss the rise of solar district heating with the great panel that I'm very happy to moderate today. So we have Bojan Bogdanovic, which is Principal Fund Manager for Renewable District Energy at the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Hi, Bojan, and thank you for joining us. We have Ina Berdzina-Veita, which is the CEO of Salapils Siltums. That's one of the district heating utility that Barbel introduced in her presentation. Welcome, Ina. We have Guglielmo Cioni, Vice President for Business Development at TVP Solar. So one of the developers which is providing some of the great projects that we just introduced. We have Mathieu Balu, Policy Officer at the Directorate for Energy at the European Commission, Energy in the Renewable Energy Units. Thank you for joining us. So very much taking in charge also the heating and cooling discussion within DG Ener. And finally, again, Barbel, which is joining you for the overall panel. So again, welcome everyone. And maybe just to start taking a bit of distance and hate from solar thermal, just to the broader question of heating decarbonization, which of course is the underlying question we have in everybody's mouth at the moment. So where are we actually maybe for heating decarbonization? That's a question I would have for you, maybe Mathieu, to set the scene from the Commission perspectives. Where are we and what has been done so far, if we look at the Fit for 55 of the Repower EU, to encourage the uptake of renewable heat and of solar heat projects?
Thank you, Aurelie. Good morning, everyone, and big thanks to Euroheat and Power for the invitation to talk today. Yes, if I can say a few words about the context, because we at the moment are making extraordinary efforts to speed up the energy transformation, to accelerate the deployment of renewables, of course, to tackle climate change, but also especially in the context of Russia's aggression of Ukraine, to secure the EU's energy supply and clean energy supply and affordable to our citizens. So we proposed in that context last year, you mentioned Repower EU, to increase the EU renewables target to 45%. That means doubling the ambition of the current target for the ongoing decade. It's extraordinary. It would have been unimaginable 10 years ago. So it means our understanding of what is technically and politically feasible has completely changed. But now if we look at heat specifically, half of the energy consumed today in the EU is for heating and cooling. That is often a forgotten fact. And more than 70% of that comes from fossil fuel, mostly gas. So there has been significant progress on renewables, but mostly renewable electricity, very slow on heating and cooling. And today, most of the renewables that are consumed for the production of heat and cold are traditional biomass. So we really need to accelerate this. There's a cost-effective potential. The benefits will be felt directly by EU citizens if we manage that. 80% of all the energy consumed in households is for heating and cooling. So we really have to make sure that all technologies play their role fully in that. And modern, efficient district heating and cooling can deliver on many objectives in that sense. Of course, the promotion of renewable energy, energy efficiency, the overall decarbonization of that heating and cooling sector, but also energy system integration. That is to say, the energy system of the future, where all technologies will interplay, where consumers will also be producers, and so on. So we are actively working on all that. Under the Repower EU plan, there are specific actions on heating and cooling, and also specifically on district heating to promote the development, the modernization of district heating systems, but also to exploit industrial heat wherever it's available, to make sure that we develop local approaches also with renewable energy communities. That plan is an acceleration, but it builds on work that we were already doing under Fit for 55. I won't list all the actions because it's about a comprehensive review of all our legislation, but just to make you understand the various work strands of this. The first one is on the link between building renovation and renewable energy. We, through the Energy Performance of Building Directive and its revision, we're really promoting a holistic view of building renovation policies, including district heating and cooling. We work on specific measures, for instance, that will result in ending subsidies to fossil fuel heating in buildings. We proposed under Repower EU a solar obligation for new buildings. So we are also promoting solar technologies in that context. We're working on improving the energy efficiency of products, which will also lead to phasing out fossil heating and indirectly, therefore, promoting renewable-based heating. Specifically on district heating, under the Renewable Energy Directive and the Energy Efficiency Directive, we are also driving a gradual improvement of systems. We are raising the annual target for renewable energy in district heating systems. So a whole range of measures through which we hope to deliver that progress.
Thank you, Mathieu. Quite a comprehensive overview indeed. Just picking up on one thing that you said, that we see kind of a slower progress from the heat side for the uptake of renewable and cleaner sources compared to the electricity. Just handing that back to our panel. I mean, why is that? Why do you think today we have maybe a smaller uptake of cleaner sources? Are we actually up to the challenge at EU level in this regard? Anyone wants to take this up? Maybe Guglielmo or
Bojan raised his hand.
Bojan raised his hand.
Great. I don't see the hands. Go ahead, Bojan.
Okay, thank you. This was extremely encouraging, what Mathieu mentioned, and we feel this great and growing attention of EU and towards heating and cooling, and this is very important. I just echo whatever was already said, that electricity and renewable electricity was in focus, and renewable heating and cooling was not so much. But now we feel this growing ambition in everywhere, and this is very important because why? Probably because it was easier and more attractive to do renewable electricity. You know, everybody likes to see some PVs and wind farms, and But we will not make any progress and succeed in this unless we focus on renewable heating. And we feel this also while discussing with the local stakeholders. CBRD is very focused on approaching local stakeholders, but also ministries. So we work with cities, we work with district heating companies, we work with ministries, and we see a big shift in last several years in the approach. Especially now when this tragic situation in war in Ukraine happened. So now, you know, before, when you discuss with a city or with the ministry, renewable heating was more question of climate change, fighting climate changes, sometimes air quality, and that was that. Now, it's a very important question of security of supply, but also for a bit of affordability for the end consumers. So now the cities are and district heating operators are much more interested in shifting towards easy solution like natural gas was to more complex solution, but absolutely necessary. We need to diversify fuel mix, and this is why we see this, we feel this, and we need to recalculate all calculation we have prepared until 2 years ago, because nothing is the same. We can address that later in the panel, because prices of heat, prices of material, everything is totally different. Focus is totally different. And now is the time for solar thermal and renewable heating and cooling. And thanks to, I applaud to EU for huge support. We will also mention later in panel for the projects we are doing in countries of operation, EBRD, especially in Western Balkans. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bojan. Great point you made just here. I mean, I don't know if the focus on electricity is because it was easier or more attractive. I mean, some of us that were here 10 years ago remember actually that, yeah, the audience was not really acquired to the cause back then. But what changed is really this EU support and involvement and this new momentum that was created. Mathieu, you said before, we have seen things that would have been impossible 10 years ago. So that's very much also from our hand on the renewable heat industry, a great moment, a pivotal moment, because 10 years from now, if we do well the job, we will have also the same feeling that, yeah, maybe we went beyond the limits that we thought were here. Also take the point on the need to recalculate the modeling, the acknowledgement from the Commission on the role of renewable heat, but also excess heat sources. I think if we look at the modeling that was done back in 2019, a lot of sustainable heat sources are not taken into account. So that's really important as we are right now in the implementation of our climate neutrality strategy. So we need more renewable heating and cooling. We need more renewable district heating. Looking at solar thermal, I mean, Barbo, you really presented already in your introduction a very strong points pleading in favor of solar thermal. I see that we have from the audience already questions that relate to the material intensity of solar thermal, the efficiency, the ability to provide a constant temperature. Is that true or not? So maybe a question for you and Guglielmo. In short, if we look at the challenge is big, we need more renewable heating and cooling. What is the concrete value proposition of solar thermal combined with district heating and cooling infrastructure to really accelerate Europe's heat transition? Why are we talking about solar thermal only today?
Yeah. If I may, Barvel, and then I leave it to you. I think that the challenge needs to be defined a bit more. The real challenge, I mean, for all of us, is to build progressively more and more projects. And so the subjects involved in this challenge are not only solar thermal companies, but also the municipalities and the project developers. And this is a big challenge, and it requires really the effort of everyone. I'm seeing, I have to say, I agree with Bojan about what he said. Recently, after the war in Ukraine, the attention and the sensitivity of district heating companies towards the diversification of sources has increased dramatically. And this is good, I believe, because they're looking for also for local generation of heat, which is what we offer with the solar thermal. And this is something that nobody can take away from you once you have it. So it's really a kind of basic component of the energy mix that in principle all cities should have. It's clear that when you speak to clients, so to the operators of district heating networks, they tend still today to avoid problems. And it's clear that building a renewable infrastructure in any city, it is a problem. I was looking at the picture that you showed, Verbal, about Pristina, and the fact that within the project, you have a long pipeline connecting the site of the solar thermal plant with the city. So this is something that relates to spatial planning. It's clear that in Pristina you have done it, and you know that you have to draw this long pipeline to reach the available area for the solar plant. But in many cities, it is not like that. And I also agree that in principle, space is available. But the reality is that when you go and look at the details of each municipal project, you will find that this available space most of the time has a high value because it's located in nearby city centers, or it needs to be connected with some pipelines that are expensive. And this is something that not many companies are really ready to do or to include in the project. I was talking to a district heating company recently, and I asked them for a number, because of course they build underground pipelines to reach new clients. And they said to me, okay, for every megawatt that we can distribute to new clients, we more or less count 1 million euros of investment in pipeline to reach them. So this kind of thinking should be extended also to reaching not only the clients, but also the available areas to build renewable infrastructure. So you see that this is a wider challenge, but let's talk about solar thermal. Can we really scale up our systems in a way that that we become impactful on the overall system? My answer is yes, but it takes a lot of investment, because can you imagine today overall solar thermal in Europe installed is about 35 gigawatt. I'm sure that Pedro will of course comment on this later. But if we want to reach a meaningful goal, we need to at least triple or quadruple it in a very short time. Are we up to building such production capacity and to deploy it? I believe so, because the production system of solar thermal panels, it's something that is well established, and we are industrial and we know what it takes, but we need some certainties in order to make this big production investment. And these certainties and this risk assessment can only be provided if we are seeing clearly that there is a market for us to deploy all this additional production. In this respect, I think that the policy measures that we are seeing put in place by the European Commission are going into that direction, but sometimes they are not enough to mobilize really the will of a district heating network to adopt and to take the headache of building renewable infrastructure on their networks.
Thank you, Guglielmo. I mean, we will come back many times during this panel also on how to do more and maybe better on the policy side. So you mentioned some of the challenges, which we will come back to, coordination with local authorities, spatial planning, investment. Also the possibility, though, the opportunity for the ability to scale up very quickly. Just two specific questions that are kind of recurring from the audience, so we can put them aside. There was one question directly to you, Guglielmo, relating to your project. Solar thermal heat plant that can have a guaranteed temperature level. Could you just explain a bit more how you can ensure this and what is the volatility of it? And maybe also a more general question on the material intensity of solar thermal, as we're talking a lot these days at EU level on critical raw material access.
So very quickly about these two things. First of all, we are trying to approach solar thermal project development really as infrastructure investment. So the only thing that matters is the output of the solar field. And the output of the solar field is energy at a certain temperature level. So whenever we measure the output of our solar fields, they are measured above the threshold of the client's network temperature. This is something that needs to be made clear. Of course, you can generate heat at so many different temperature levels, but the reality is, especially when we do retrofitting of existing network, is that the return temperature of the network is most often above 60 degrees. And so what we really provide as a guarantee of performance is the amount of energy that the solar field will produce above the temperature threshold from established by the client. And this can be, okay, for us, it is possible because we have this new generation collector that Abel was talking about, the high vacuum flat plates. But I guess that this can be achieved also by other technology. In terms of energy, of material intensity, I mean, a solar panel, I mean, let me talk about mine. It's 27 kilos, 25 to 27 kilos. And they are mostly made of steel, plus copper and aluminum. That's it. And they are all materials that are not in any way considered as a shortage. They are commodities, global commodities, just like bananas. And I believe that this is an important added value that we bring in terms of security of supply. We produce in Europe with materials that are available everywhere. And I think this is most important because you see other technologies that are also very important in the effort for decarbonization are more critical in terms of raw materials like cobalt or rare earths and so on. In our case, it's really global commodities, and that's it.
All right. Thanks a lot, Guglielmo. I mean, and if you have other questions, people, you can always reach out to the panelists directly on this one. So indeed, I mean, the question of material intensity is becoming more topical in general when we talk about the EU energy transition. That's also why we need to be, on the other hand, more energy efficient. To also make sure that whatever we use is for residual demand and we do the right efforts. But looking also at maybe a concrete project, Ina. So one of the projects that were displayed by Verbal is the solar district heating that you have in Latvia. I mean, can you just tell us a bit more how it happened? There are a lot of questions here on the chat on what are the success factors also for a solar district heating and cooling. How do you make it work? What is actually helping you on the ground? Is it a nice policy framework, EU level? Is it, you know, the government, the city? Is it just a very sound ecosystem with the local industry and the communities? How did you make it work? And what is your return on the experience for the rest of the audience, Ina?
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much. Actually, it's a mix. It's a mix of everything. And I want to say that it's a mix, it's a courage. First of all, it's a courage. And we have the plan of moving from fossil fuels during the 10 years, step by step, by increasing efficiency of the whole system together from the client, from production to the client. And the solar is our, how to say, the most wonderful kid in our system. And as Bojan said, that it's a diversification, and diversification is the tool to the district heating. First is efficiency of the system. You have to check everything from the client to the production, every point. The second, it's also the support from EU. The EU support is very important for us in the country where the district heating were totally old, and it's helped us a lot. Then we had the municipality and also the inhabitants. So we have when we installed the thermal solar field, it's already 3 years, and as Barbel mentioned, it gave us 16% of the solar in the annual amount of the district heating. Now it's more than 20%. And that is because we learned how to manage, and it's about the temperatures. It's about the temperatures. You can, learned how to use the storage the most correctly, how to use the temperature, how to regulate the field temperatures. And this is a nice combination of everything. And since this winter was quite warm, we nearly didn't use natural gas this year, because we managed also to combine the thermal storage with the biomass production. So we put more biomass heat into this thermal storage, and then we don't need to use the gas during the peak so much. So the storage is also a big part of production. And also we are very happy because we, after the first year of working with the thermal, we saw how much electricity we need for the pumps, and we installed the PV field in order to produce necessary electricity for our field. So we didn't have to buy also electricity. And now we are working with Plan Energy and trying to calculate the best size of heat pump in order to cut even more fossil fuels or any fuel of our production. Our main goal is to produce heat as more emission-free as possible. And I know that step by step we will gain that. And if we talk about this year, showed us that how dramatically we are dependent on different fuels. That's one thing. And if we compare in Latvia, there are many district heating systems in Latvia. The price in Salaspils was one of the lowest one, and this is a real gain for our inhabitants. And more new clients are wanting to connect to district heating. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ina. Great to hear. Also interesting to come back on this also global perspective of the network that we painted, that it's also true that there is this connection with electricity, increasingly so, with the use of heat pumps. So I think already now that there's an interesting information from the overall speakers, which is that you do not necessarily need only heat pumps, because there is also this approach with diversifying with a different type of collector and different technologies, but also when needing heat pump, there is really this direct connection with system integration that we see, and the ability also for the district heating and cooling providers to develop their own self-consumption for the heat pumps, or even sign a PPA. That's very agile also as a business model, what you developed. Coming back to this type of project, what made it easier? I mean, you said courage, of course, and so this agility that you mentioned in the diversification between the technologies. I would like to ask Barbel and Bojan also to step in there. I mean, in terms of the front runner countries for solar thermal, maybe Barbel first, what are the type of policy frameworks that we see? And then I would like to hear also Bojan from your experience on the ground. Barbel.
Thank you, Aurelie. Yes, I think that's really interesting to look at. If we look at Denmark, for example, there were two measures that framed this market, which exploded. You know, we have seen like 130 district heating plants in a country which is not, I mean, splendid with sunshine. And these two measures were that they had a quote for the utilities to reach a certain emission reduction. And this quote was able to be produced with solar heat, fulfilled with solar heat. And the second one was a tax on gas. So gas was less attractive, and there was a quote to reduce emissions. And this brought the market up. And what happened then is, and this is repeated now in Germany, once you have a critical mass of systems and the utilities can talk with each other, you know, how is your system performing? And they had this very transparent, you know, way of showing the results online. So you were able to enter a website and see live the system production from your neighboring town. This made the trust into the technology increased it a lot and made more and more investors available. And I think we have seen in Germany, Germany is driven by two sides at the moment. One is the energy communities. These are the small towns which became, they had the strong will to become independent, and often they even built new district heating plants completely from scratch with the nice funding we had. But now we see that we have a critical mass of larger plants now where utilities invested, and we're hoping now for the same effect, because we still have nice funding in Germany, that there is like a rumor in terms of, you know, in my federal state, there are already 3 or 4 well-known cities that have a 7, 8 something megawatt plant, so that a rollout happens. Because this seems to be a barrier where we go to the new countries now, that everybody wants to see it in their neighboring sites. You know, I think Ina, you did an excellent job. You traveled to Denmark, looked at the fields, got back to your very far away country and said, if they can do it, I can do it. So we have to bring a lot of utilities to Denmark to see the big fields. But this is, I mean, to give you some ideas on what kind of policy measures. It's clear that this market can only be developed with policy framework. I want to just quote again that it's very challenging to build a sustainable business for collector manufacturers in solar district heating and in solar process heat because of the long development times of projects. So this sector needs by the EU tremendous support, and we have seen this tremendous support in form of a feed-in tariff over 20 years to increase PV volumes. The solar thermal has 10 years of declining market behind it, so we have a reduced industry today, and we have to build up fast, and without framework and financial support, this will not work. This was my thanks.
Thank you, Barbel. I mean, I will come back to Mathieu right after Boyan also, because I think it's one thing to say we need more for the policy framework. I would need you maybe on the panel to prepare also, because there has been a lot of things done, it's true. So maybe more on the question of what is missing from the Fit for 55 and the Repower EU. That would be interesting to bring that to Mathieu, and then he can reply on this specific point. But now up to you, Boyan. I mean, you did a great job really to promote more renewable district heating systems and more solar thermal systems, in particular in the Western Balkans. I mean, what are, from your perspective, also the success factor? Is it hard to finance? How is the EBRD intervening to facilitate those projects, and where do you see the main ingredients for success?
Yes, first is that we don't have any other option than to succeed. And in order to succeed, I will repeat, we need solar thermal as a part of the fuel mix in district heating system. And we need district heating system to decarbonize dense urban areas. So it's a must. And now that's one, but how? First, I need to mention we are very happy to have a great support from Austrian government that help us form this Renewable District Energy in Western Balkans fund, but also a great cooperation with the KfW German bank, because we worked on developing Pristina together. So we need to mention them. We don't want to take all the credit for us. So it can be done. Pristina is an example, because the financing is secured and the project is progressing. And but let's start very briefly with the challenges, with the barriers. So these barriers are now, it can be overcome, but let's mention them. We need land availability. For instance, in Novi Sad, we have a very interesting idea to utilize freshwater supply area of the city. So this is a sanitary protected area that cannot be used for other purposes than for harvesting the fresh water and solar thermal, because it's already included in city planning documents. So this is one of the examples, and the beauty of the solution is that in a very close proximity there is an existing CHP with a full infrastructure. In Pančevo, for instance, the case was that the land is surrounded by railway, so it's not approachable. You cannot use it very efficiently. So every city has the special. So land availability is an issue, But now with these new circumstances, there is a greater chance that we will find the land. Summer consumption in some countries can be challenged because not all the district heating systems have a high summer consumption. CO2 pricing systems in some of the Eastern Europe and other countries of operation from EBRD, there is no CO2 pricing, so we need to overcome this lack of incentives by providing subsidies for the system. However, prices of natural gas, we already mentioned natural gas, we don't need to tax it anymore. Natural gas is now very expensive. We don't need to tax it anymore. So we just need to recalculate, as I already mentioned, we need to recalculate everything with the new prices. And as Guillermo mentioned, now that there is a big push from all the stakeholders. Previously, and what we also need to do, we need to dedicate funds and people, and we need to raise awareness. We not only raise awareness and skills with the district heating companies and the cities, we also need to build more designers, train more designers, train more contractors, because this area will definitely grow. So this panel is actually what we need to do. We need to motivate others to join, because this field will be much more attractive in the future. For instance, what I also would like to mention, solar thermal is the perfect for a private involvement through PPPs or direct private investment, because the private capital likes to have certainty, and solar thermal is very certain. You can calculate yield from the system from many years in front. You don't have the influence of fuel prices. So this is the technology that provides the best certainty in the future, even better than heat pumps, which I also like. But if you want to invest in private investment, you can calculate your income 25 years in front. You don't have these disturbances from the market to jeopardize your project. So we need actually to have more panels like this, but also all organization. And again, I will mention very good examples from Austrian government or from EU. They need to provide support, and international organization like EBRD need to dedicate competent colleagues to focus and work on this. But all others, designers, contractors, district heating operators, like Ina perfectly explained, this focus, this proactive approach make the result. We just need to, now we have a good examples, and I will finish with this. Now we have a good examples. We should bring people to see what is going on there, to see the functioning systems, and then motivate everybody to join this effort, and it will grow, definitely. I'm sure about that.
Thank you, Bojan. I mean, it's already a lot of good stuff that you gave in to complement. I mean, of course, the aspect related to land availability, of course, city planning, CO2 pricing, subsidies, and also the possibility to dedicate fund. That is really, oh, the light is back on. Thank you. That is one of the challenges which we may face. I mean, just all of those points have been touched upon in the Fit for 55 and the Repower EU. So if we were really to go for concrete improvements, so go-to areas which are today put in place by the Commission, is it not enough, or do we need different type of go-to areas, or maybe it's not implementable enough in the practicality? City planning, do we need to go further than what was agreed in, for example, the EED or the EPBD? We have mandatory planning. Should we have mandatory implementation of the planning? CO2 pricing, what about this EU ETS reform that was introduced? I think many of us were a bit disappointed with the level of ambition for building. So how can we tackle it differently, maybe at European level? Same for the subsidies. We could say that there are already a lot of state aid available for any type of energy sources? So do we need different type of state aid or funding? Just bouncing back the ball to the rest of the panelists, and then I would like Mathieu to pick up on some of the suggestions. Who wants to start? Maybe Guglielmo or Ina?
Yeah.
Guglielmo, yes?
Yeah, I can say something about this. The keyword that you mentioned is mandatory. We really need to generate the demand on the market. I mean, there are, of course, several cities and district heating companies that feel that they are ready and they really want to implement new generation capacity, renewable generation, solar, thermal, and others. But I must say that most of the clients that we meet are not sufficiently motivated to do that. I mean, Elon was saying that they were brave. They were brave, absolutely. Because, taking such a decision today with the context that it is just a very big headache without any real commitment or let's say without any fixed targets to reach. So I believe that the motivation on the market should be much more clear than it is today. I praise very much what happened in the car electric vehicle industry, in the car industry, where they say they're going to phase out by 2035. Then, of course, they added some modification. But this is very brave, and this is what we need as well. Because until our users, the district heating company, don't see that they really have to do it, we will see a lot of feet dragging around and delaying decisions, and we'll see about that. So it is important, I believe, that we create a context in which everyone has to take their responsibility. Then I like to add that the market of solar district heating is not really monolithic. I mean, there are the big cities, and they are much more problematic. They have huge demand, so it's very difficult to find big areas to feed them with the district with solar district heating. But there are a lot of, I mean, even a much bigger number of small cities and countryside villages and so on, which can adopt solar thermal much easier than those. I want to recall the project of Groningen that we are building right now in the Netherlands. There, of course, we found an area of 12 hectares. I mean, the developers found an area of 3 hectares or 12 hectares, and it was a closed up trash site. So they cannot really use it for anything else, and they dedicate it to solar thermal district heating. This is a dualism between solar thermal and photovoltaic that we need to clarify as well. Solar thermal can only be used in proximity of the user. So when you have areas that are in proximity to thermal users, it's much more logical to use it for solar thermal than photovoltaic, which in fact just need a connection to the grid that can be made pretty much anywhere. So this is also kind of reasoning that we need to start talking about, to prioritize and to make it more rational, the way we use the land. Because the big fight in the next 20 years that I see is about natural resources and land, because we have to decarbonize everything. I mean, electricity, heat, and so on. And so land is becoming the crucial resource to use rationally.
All right, thank you, Guglielmo. So very much focus on the mandatory aspect, which especially of the planning, which would help also solving some aspects related to certainty, financing, and indeed access to land, because it's true that once you've done the broader planning at city level, you're able really to dedicate some areas to some more production or some more storage and also infrastructure. Any other comments maybe from Ina on also what you would need concretely from the ground? How could the EU and government help you or do more than what you have been through today?
Thank you. As I can see, one of the biggest emitters today on the heating market in Latvia are individual and local heat producers. First of all, they are not measured, counted how much they use, what they use, and they are producing it inefficiently. You mentioned the point that it is important, the mandatory territory planning, and if it is the local or individual heat producer in the area of the city, it must, you should draw the zone of the district heating in the area. In some cities, it's done by municipalities. Some cities are not. I think if it comes from Europe, that it should be the zones where you should measure and see how much and how are you using the heat. And district heating is the best and professional how to do it. This could be helpful. The other thing, what I think is quite important to support. For example, in Latvia, one of the biggest problem is the electricity grid availability enough. For example, there are more and more solar and wind producers are coming, and the grids are overloaded. And that's why I think the district heating producers are the best one to be the electricity, how to say, self-competent, to produce the electricity for your needs 24/7 as much as possible from renewable sources like solar and wind. That's our, I think, important things which we would like to get as support or direction from EU. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Ina. Very important remarks. So maybe coming back to you now, Mathieu. I mean, obviously, the Commission is always the tough job on the panel because you get demands and then you need to reply to it. So it's true, you went through a lot of pieces of legislation that we had. Maybe to come back on 3 aspects that were mentioned by our speaker and how we could maybe tackle it better to really unlock the potential of solar thermal and district heating. So the planning aspect, how do we make it really mandatory? And that's true that right now we have more mandatory planning, but then the implementation again is left to the local authorities and the cities. And maybe here you could tell us more about the NSEPs, those master plans from the governments and the role that the Commission has to screen it. I mean, how can we really leverage in a way also the national energy and climate plans to give them tools really in order to have this local implementation? Because I think there are some valid doubts sometimes from the renewable heating community as well on how they can really be impactful up to the ground. So the planning, there was a very fair comment on the individual boilers, which remain today also the most inefficient way to produce heat. So we know it's not easy. We've seen the big EU drama for the ban of thermic vehicles, but you know, how are we going to take and when are we going to take an extra step to get rid of the boilers, the individual boilers? And a fair comment also on system integration, this mention of the grid overload issue, which is popping up in Latvia. That's not only the case in Latvia. We already see very strong constraints in other highly electrified countries like Norway or Sweden. So we have looked at the flexibility perspective rather through the angle of battery storage so far. When are we and how can we at European level more value the contribution of thermal storage, for example, co-located with solar thermal, or even district heating network as kind of a flexibility buffer? So Mathieu, up to you.
Thanks, Aurélie, and all. Quite a lot of questions. Maybe to take one step back, I think the reason why we have struggled to really make progress on the decarbonization of heating and cooling is that it's really complicated. It's very complex. You have a very diverse landscape. It touches on lots of other policy issues, and it's difficult to have a real top-down approach to all these issues. If you take land planning, it's super sensitive. It's very political. It's something that member states, I mean, that is really at the core competence of member states, and there's a limit to what we at EU level can also impose. So indeed, with the proposals on permitting, the proposals from the Commission to require member states to designate go-to areas, we really went already quite far into a territory that was relatively untouched or left to more bottom-up approaches so far. NECPs, what can be the role of NECPs? Maybe one reminder as well, we are working under the first generation of NECPs. It's these plans, integrated energy and climate plans, cover basically the whole economy. We, under our governance of the Energy Union, we really asked member states to put in everything they're doing and their plan to be doing over a 10-year span, ensure that there is consistency across all aspects of the energy system, the climate, the greenhouse gas emissions, not only CO2, but the other gas. It's a very complex exercise, and this was the first one. It is delivering results in terms of our ability to monitor progress, to identify gaps, to identify weaknesses, and also to use that to develop policy responses, to go to specific member states and tell them where they are not doing enough. And we are currently working with them on the revision of these NECPs, on the first revision, and so not only to improve what they are putting in it, but also on our side, working on the template to make sure that we learn from what has been done under that first generation of NECPs, and make sure that it is also aligned and delivering what we are currently doing under Fit for 55, Repower EU, etc. So it's a very complex work in progress. We are taking note of the weaknesses. We are passing the message. Member states are supposed to send us their draft NECPs by June this year. We will assess them before the end of the year, send our comments to them so that they can finalize these plans. And our objective is indeed to make sure that on these aspects where they haven't sufficiently delivered, it is better for this time. Then maybe an important point in terms of planning, we really want to integrate the planning of district heating systems, of storage, including thermal storage, with the planning of energy systems and electric systems. So we are proposing in our legislation that this is done not only at electricity distribution level, but also with transmission operators who are working on 10-year plans for the development of European electricity networks, to make sure that there is consistency and that the role, the flexibility, the balancing role that district heating systems and that thermal storage can deliver to the electricity system is really taken into account in that overall planning of our energy systems. There were lots of questions, so I don't know if I can hog the floor further and go further on other topics, or if I spoke already long enough. I can give a couple of more answers on
burning comments.
Maybe just, so I mentioned grid integration on boilers. I mentioned it already. We're working on the revision of the eco-design and energy labeling regulation for boilers. Those are the main instruments. The eco-design basically shaves off the lower part of the market and eliminates the least performing appliances. You're not able to sell them anymore. And the energy label gives really visibility to the best appliances and therefore make them more attractive and encourages manufacturers to put on the market things that will not get a D or an E rating, but a better one. And those have been basically the single biggest energy efficiency measures the EU has ever taken. So this remains the best way to drive the market. Then again, it's a very diverse landscape. We cannot impose everything top down. So we give directions with targets, and we are really revising all the targets for heating and cooling, for buildings, for district heating, to give a direction, to show a clear signal to investors. This is how the market and the EU system will evolve year on year, and to force member states to take action. They have these targets, they have to report on their achievement under NECPs, they have to find the right solutions to deliver on that. And that's where the mandatory aspect will come in. And then we are adding some drivers, some qualifiers, let's say, for clean heating. So for instance, by the definition of energy, of efficient district heating and cooling, which evolves from year to year with an increasing share of renewable energy that has to be included, and an increasing use of waste heat. We make this a more attractive prospect. We give the signal so that the access to finance is improved, because it can then qualify under our other instruments that make sure that financing goes to the efficient investments, such as the green taxonomy and so on. And next to that, of course, we are working with financing organizations to develop the best portfolio adapted to specific types of ownership or financing of networks.
Thank you, Mathieu. Very important, the point on financing indeed. Any reactions from the panel, Bojan?
I really need to step in. So Mathieu reminded me of one extremely important aspect now we feel. So now we are discussing solar thermal projects, and electricity companies, publicly owned or private, are now much more interested in this, because solar thermal was the trigger to move forward thermal storage, seasonal thermal storage technology. And now this is great that Mathieu mentioned. Now we feel that not only district heating companies and cities are interested in combination of solar thermal and seasonal heat storage, like we envisage in our project, but also electricity companies see this as a, we need to diversify district heating, but also balancing of renewable electricity needs to be diversified. So the idea that we will have enough batteries to do balancing, and of course reversible hydro plants to balance all, no, it's not possible. We need heat storage, and solar thermal is the technology that generated a solution for, so we don't need to search for a solution for seasonal heat storage. We already have them. So thank you, Mathieu, for mentioning this. This will be a huge push also for solar thermal, because it can be combined. Solar thermal with the seasonal heat storage can be combined to be used for balancing of the electricity production. That is very, very important, and we need, and thank you, Mathieu, and you and EU for pushing forward this, but it will naturally come, because electricity company are now aware that they need to also to take a look at this. And there is also one thing I would like to also to mention. We need to push district heating companies to decarbonize. That is great. We need to do it, but we need to support them in the same time. But we need to make balance, and with this planning and these mandatory measures, we should not just put pressure on district heating companies and make them less competitive towards individual heating solution that at the end will not provide the solution. So there is a balanced approach needed, but I see a very good balanced approach. I'm not afraid. We just need to keep it. And final comment, NSCP, great tool that showed that ambition we need to have for heating and cooling is much more challenging than for renewable electricity. So if you take a look of the drafts or already work with NSCP, it will show you that we have a higher chances to succeed in renewable electricity than in renewable heating, cooling, and heat is half. So the great thing from this NSCP iterative process, as Mathieu mentioned, draft, learn, do more, is that definitely a necessity to support renewable heating and cooling and district heating and cooling will grow, because a gap is already identified, and we see that EU is proactive in that way. Thank you for once again, Matthew, for this.
Thank you, Bojan. Indeed, fair point also on the diversification of heating and cooling. Targets are good. Targets with incentive frameworks are better. And that's exactly how it happened in the electricity industry. Electricity infrastructures or utilities were not forced just to diversify their mix without any incentives. There was a very generous incentive framework, which showed really how successful it can be. And fair point also on the diversification of the balancing. And maybe in this regard, the ongoing review of the market design could be a chance, because there is indeed also this focus on flexibility and demand response, and how to better value maybe also market-wise those different uses. And it's true that it could be interesting to broaden this perspective also to district heating and cooling as a flexibility provider, to thermal storage and its way to be valued in the market. And that's always a point which I find very stunning. Thermal storage is already providing seasonal heat demand. It is 100 times cheaper than electricity storage. And yet, when we talk about seasonal storage today, the biggest focus is on hydrogen, for example, which is far less mature from the cost perspective, also very material intensive, and in fact, not there yet compared to the thermal technologies that we have. So really a big area to work on. We have still a lot of questions from the audience. So maybe before addressing them for the last 6 to 7 minutes, just wanted to ask the panel if there was also any other point you wanted to bring up in response to what Mathieu and Bojan just said.
I'd like just to add one consideration, is that, of course, we can increase the complexity of our proposition as much as we want. We could have the solar thermal and then integrated with seasonal storage and then get the help from heat pumps and so on. I must say that in some cases, this is really necessary. In the case of Pristina, they don't have any summer load from the network. So, of course, you need the seasonal storage. But in many other cases, this is not really the point. So if I had to draw a kind of sector strategy to go towards a higher deployment of solar thermal for district heating, I would really focus on, first of all, on the satisfaction of this summer load and retrofitting existing network, rather than increasing the complexity of the system, because it's harder to be accepted by the client to have some more complex installation, including seasonal storage or other sources of energy. So it's important, I believe, that we keep it straight, at least in the beginning, and we start demonstrating, because there are not enough cases. Of course, Denmark is full of them, but it's the only country where you have really a lot of solar thermal deployments. And the rest of Europe needs to have more and more demonstrations, and they need to be at scale. So at this point, I don't believe there is additional reasons to do smaller than megawatt plants, and we really need to make our efforts to involve the project developers and the cities to deploy new large-scale solar thermal for district heating.
Yes. So keep calm and start building at scale, Guglielmo.
Exactly. Exactly.
You wanted to react on storage.
Yes, thanks, Aurélie. You see a very long answer, and I forgot to one part of it, which is on storage, that the European Commission adopted on the 14th of March a set of recommendations on on storage, energy storage in general, and it includes large parts on thermal storage, the double role it can play on the decarbonisation of heating and cooling, obviously, but also in terms of ensuring, well, bringing flexibility and balancing services to the electricity system. So we are aware of that. Indeed, the electricity market reform is somewhere where indeed demand side flexibility systems are also being promoted. So we absolutely have that on our agenda.
Perfect. Thank you, Mathieu. Just to pick up for the 4 minutes left on some of the questions from the chat which remain not known. So there is a question also which is maybe more to the ground on from a solar thermal developer perspective. So maybe for Yuina and Guglielmo, very quick. When you're looking into entering, do you favor more greenfield project? Is it easier? Or when you are connecting kind of to an existing district heating network, for example, what are you looking at? Do you first work on, let's say, the network itself to make it solar thermal ready? I mean, how does it happen?
Well, if I have to look for short-term deliveries, of course, the project needs to be already well developed, but I like both, and we follow both kind of projects, the early stage and the mid-advanced stage, because it's really what creates a stable pipeline for the future.
Okay, Ina?
Correct. Yes, as I mentioned, is first of all the existing network should be ready in order to install. It should have better temperatures. It shouldn't have losses. First of all, energy efficiency first, and then step by step looking how you can do it better and better. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And that's an important point, because when we discuss also the allocation of fund and money for the modernization of district heating and cooling infrastructure, there is sometimes this chicken and egg, you know, but why should we invest? Because those are too much based on fossil. And on the other hand, if you do not invest on this infrastructure, you will not enable this also increasing penetration of sustainable sources. So the funding aspect, very important. Another question at broader level, it was mentioned those multi-megawatt projects, maybe a question for you, Berbel. So we see more and more multi-megawatt project. There is this question as well on how can solar thermal better contribute to also countries where district heating and cooling does not exist so much yet. So for example, Netherlands. So in terms of the future potential that we see, how do you foresee the growth of solar thermal? Maybe if you have some figures in the next 10 years or up to 2030.
That would be nice to have this crystal ball. Actually, we have seen in the last years a lot of upwards, downwards trends, you know, in solar district heating. We had very good years, like we had a very good year in Germany now with 35,000 square meters newly installed capacity in solar district heating. So I think I'm with Bojan here somehow. The megawatt which are announced are enormous. And it's the first time ever since I screened this market, and this is about 10 years, that we have this big investments, you know. So, and we have them in new countries, thanks to visibility studies. Maybe this is a message to the EU as well, you know, like we don't need, I mean, if you look into solar thermal as a infrastructure investment, 25 years, in a lot of situations, it's now cost effective because you find levelized costs of heat, which are in the level of gas or even lower. But often it's not seen at that. It has high investment costs at the beginning. And to facilitate it for utilities, this financing of visibility studies that we have seen in Balkan and Austrian made megawatt size projects easier to start talking about. Maybe this is a bit of an answer, but I don't have a crystal ball. I hope that we get you back to a really growth curve. And well, at the moment, it looks like with the megawatt announcements we have, but they need to materialize.
Yes, thanks a lot, Berbel. So, I mean, before I hand over, because we're already at the end of the time for the Q&A, so I would like really to thank you all very much for a very interesting discussion. I mean, I wanted to ask you a last question, as you know, and I think we touched upon it a lot. Do we need a European heat strategy? And if so, what would it look like? So could I ask you maybe 20 seconds, really not more, a quick opinion on that? Do we need a new strategy for the sake of a strategy? Do we need something that streamlines altogether what we have? Just quick perspective, and Mathieu, you'll get the last word. So Berbel, 20 seconds.
I think implementing what is already done at the EU or national level is the biggest challenge, and challenging enough.
Thank you, Verbal. Ina?
My main idea is integration, the integration of all energy systems, heating, electricity, hydrogen, whatever. Thank you.
Thank you. So system integration. Guglielmo?
As Barbel, I think we had enough strategy. It's time to put that in practice.
Okay, implementation. And Bojan?
We need more studies. The scale of will bring results. We need to do more studies, and more quality project will identify. If the future strategies will support more studies, then it's also a good way to do all.
Yes, very fair point. I really coming back to this 2050 study back in 2019, which barely acknowledges the role of renewable and excess heat. So Mathieu, from your perspective, what can we do more or better? Also 20 seconds.
I'm slightly relieved. Happy to work on effective implementation. We have a couple of strategies, including an energy system integration strategy from 2020, which gives a good overview on what it could look like. We had a study on district heating from last year, and I agree we need to know more about the sector. So we have a comprehensive policy framework. We are revising it, improving it. We need to implement it well. Happy to help.
Yes, thanks a lot. And I see there are also questions on the audience when it comes to data. So we will specify it, for example, for the thermal storage. I mean, those are interesting figures from the Aalborg University. Notably, I'm happy to share some elements in the chat. Thank you all again, Bojan, Guglielmo, Mathieu, Ina, and Barbel, for a very lively discussion. It was a pleasure to moderate this panel today. And now I'm very happy to hand over to Pedro Diaz, Secretary General of Solar Heat Europe, for the closing remarks. Pedro, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Aurélie, and thanks a lot to all of you. Thanks for joining today to discuss the rise of solar district heating and for the participation. Many questions were addressed online, but we'll be happy also to follow up as there were also many others that could not be tackled today. We hope that this event was informative. I believe it was, but also that it was inspiring in order to consider the potential of the combination of these two essential solutions. So for the energy transition at the centralized level, and also for our communities. So district heating networks and solar heat, which, as Aurélie was saying before, make a golden combination. As we look to transition to a more sustainable energy future, we also need to stress the need for clean, competitive, and secure solutions. So solar district heating presents an opportunity not only to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but also to create local jobs, support energy independence, and improve air quality at local level. In this turbulent period that we are now facing, we also need to value energy independence, energy security, and these combinations bring also that, particularly for the local level, to citizens, to companies, and that's a great value that needs to be further promoted. We have addressed today questions like financing, permitting, urban planning, mapping heat needs, and other topics. And we have also heard about the measures included in new regulations at EU level. We should always ask us if we are doing enough to promote such solutions. So is the investment in heating and cooling proportional to its relevance? Do we have a clear path for heating and cooling in Europe at European level, but also national and local level? Those are important answers because we need to think how much the world has changed, not only in the last 2 years. So think of March 2021, the beginning of the energy crisis, or even last year, which aggravated the beginning of the war, that aggravated even more the already existing energy crisis, or think of the spring of 2019 pre-pandemic. So it's a completely different world. And we need to have decisive actions from the public side, from the private side, to address these outstanding challenges that we face today. In order to close, so extend the thanks to the esteemed panelists for your expertise, insights, but also for your example on what we are doing and how you are contributing to this change. Likewise, I would like to thank the attendees for the participation and thoughtful questions, and a special word of gratitude to our teams at Euroheat Power and Solar Europe for the excellent preparation of this webinar and for this very positive and enriching cooperation. So let us continue to work together, accelerate the growth of solar district heating, and pave the way for a cleaner, more resilient energy future. So thank you very much, and a good day to you all.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Bye. Have a nice day. Bye.